Hi, I'm Jenny Fish from One Big Happy Yarn Company. We want to be your yarn shop no matter where you are. Welcome back to our sock knit along. In this episode, I'll show you how to cast on, work with double pointed needles, and join in the round. If you still need supplies, click the info box below for all the links you need. We're working on the beginner lightweight sock pattern from Knitting Pure and Simple. Last time we went over all the basics on choosing supplies and checking your gauge. Go back and watch if you need to. Now, we're ready to start our socks. So for this pattern, we'll be working in the round, but yet we're using straight needles. I'll show you how we do that. When I put these down and connect them, it forms this triangle shape. Each of the points connect together, and when you knit that way, you form a tube, and so that is called knitting in the round. There are several different ways to knit socks and knit in the round. But for the purpose of this knit along, we're going to be using these double pointed needles because that's what the pattern calls for. So when we get to these connections, don't worry, I will show you how we go from one needle to the next and transition to make the circular knitting and how to continue working in the round. We're going to start our socks using the long tail cast on. I'm going to show you a little trick to keep your tension even, and that is to start out with 2 needles. And then we'll go on to how we get our cast on onto each of these other needles. So when we do a long tail cast on, we have to figure out what part of the yarn we're going to start our cast on with. We're going to go back to the method of wrapping the yarn around our needles so that we can find that perfect spot to make our slip knot. We're going to wrap about half of the number of stitches that are called for the cast on. For me, that's 32, and then I'll double it once I get there. So I'm going to wrap these around 32 times. Then I'm going to take that point, double it, and then my slip knot should go right about here. So make my slip knot. Now, using my 2 double pointed needles, I'm going to slide those through the slip knot. I'm going to cinch this up, making it comfortably smooth. Don't want that too tight. We're going to pull back like a slingshot, go under, and through. Now I have 2 cast on stitches. I'm going to do this. This is the first needle, and for my pattern, I'm going to break this evenly between 3 needles. For this one, I'm going to have 24 stitches on this first needle. And again, I'm using the long tail cast on. And if you're really not familiar and you need a little bit more information on that, check out our YouTube channel for more information. I want to show you this. Sometimes when you're using the 2 needles and you're doing this cast on, your yarn will slide between the 2 needles. Don't worry, just pull it out. But keep on the lookout for that because that does happen as you're holding these 2 needles together. Keep an eye out for that. Just undo that stitch and then go back to your cast on. Okay. So now I have the 24 stitches on my first set of needles. I'm going to pull 1 needle out. I want to show you how smooth this line looks. And that is because I kept my tension safe and secure by using the 2 needles. It gives it that added area. This is going to be the cuff of our sock, so we don't want it tight. By having the 2 needles, it stretches that out and keeps it consistent between all of our stitches. So this is the first needle. Now we want to cast on for our second needle, and this is going to be 24, and then we're going to put 20 on our second needle. It gets a little scary because now I have 3 needles in my hand, but we're only going to be focusing on these 2 needles right here. We'll go back to the slingshot position, and just with the tip of the top 2 needles, we're going to go under and through. Cinch it up, and then pull it all the way down. We're going to drop that bottom needle. We don't need to worry about it anymore. If it gets in the way, you can hold it with the back fingers here just to keep it out of the way. But our main focus is on these 2 needles. A lot of times I'll scoot them forward and scoot that one back. Be sure not to let those stitches you've already cast on slip off the tip of that needle. And then we're ready to go again. We're going to get 20 on here. Oh, see, look, it slid through there again. Like I said, that does happen. Keep an eye out for it and just undo it. Then you can go back to your slingshot position, start again. Go a little slow on this. This is the beginning. We want to get it right straight out the gate, so go slow and wrap those around. We want it consistent and loose. Okay, now I have 20 on my second needle. I'm going to pull this top one out. Now I'm going to grab my last one, and I need to put 20 on here. We're going to go back to the slingshot method and cinch it up tight. Now we're just focusing on these two top needles, holding the other ones out of the way. And we're going to cast on 20 here. Okay, now we've got all of these on here. I'm going to slide this needle out and show you what we have. So I'm going to lay this out, and I want you to see how we have this inner, it looks like a braid, but it's the bottom of the cast on stitch. We want all of that to be on the inside of our little triangle that we have here. This is going to prevent us from getting a twisted stitch, which once you start knitting in the round, if you have a twisted stitch, there's no way to fix it. So we got to start off from the beginning to make sure that all of these are going inward. Now, what we're going to do is show you how to join these so that you can set up to knit in the round. To secure this join, there's a little trick here. I'm going to flip my first stitch and my last stitch. This is the very first stitch that we put on our needle. This is the slip knot stitch. What we want to do is take this stitch, transfer it to this needle, and twist this stitch back to this needle. And that's going to secure these two needles together so we can begin to knit in the round. What we're going to do is slide this one off. Now remember, there is a slip knot there, so that'll hold. And then we're going to slide this to that needle, and then that onto that needle. Now we've successfully twisted those two stitches together, and now when we start knitting, we will be knitting in the round. Now in our pattern, the first round is the ribbing, which that's the top of the cuff. And our pattern calls for a knit one, purl one ribbing. To get that, our first stitch is going to be a knit stitch. So we're going to find our working yarn. I like to put a little slip knot in my tail just to make sure that I don't grab the wrong yarn when I go to knitting. It happens. So I've got that there. I'll feel that if I grab it by accident. I'm going to tighten this up. Make sure, again, as always, all of our, and see, look, this is twisted right here. We got to fix that right away or we're going to have a problem later on down the road. What I'm going to do, fiddle with my needles a little bit. Voila, look, we are back in action. All of them are on the inside. Always double check. We're going to slide our needle into this first stitch and knit. Our next stitch is a purl stitch. We're going to bring our yarn forward and we're going to purl into this stitch here. There we go. And the first round in knitting in the round is always kind of finicky, doesn't really look very pretty. It's kind of hard to handle and manage, but that's okay because the more you get to knitting, it works itself out. Now I see that my back needle here, I want to pay attention to this, it's sliding down. I'm just going to slide it up a little bit, make sure none of my stitches fall off my needles. I did a purl stitch, now I'm going to do a knit stitch. We're going to go all the way around to the beginning where our tail is. So I know this looks like a lot. I've got 4 needles in my hand, but I'm really only knitting and purling, and I'm really only using the 2 active needles. Once you get past this first round, you get a little bit more structure in your hands, and it makes it a lot easier to maneuver between the 4 needles. I'm going to do a few more. I want to get to this interchange here so I can show you how you go from the needle when you run out of stitches on it to get to the next needle. Notice how I just let the other ones just kind of dangle. I'm really only holding the 2 needles that I'm working with. If you do get confused between whether you're on a knit or a purl stitch, look underneath and you'll be able to see if it is a knit stitch, it's going to have a V underneath of it. If it's a purl stitch, it's going to have a little bump there. So I can tell that this is a purl, this is a knit. My next stitch is going to be a purl. That's with the yarn in front, wrap the yarn around, pull it back. Then I'm going to go to my knit stitch. I put my yarn in the back, I knit into that stitch, bring the yarn front, purl into the front stitch, wrap that around. Now I have an empty needle. I'm going to slide this needle forward, move my stitches back. I'm changing hands. I'm moving this to this hand. Go through here. I'm pushing this needle down. My next stitch is going to be a knit, so I'm putting my yarn in the back. Put my needle into this first stitch on the new needle. And knit 1. And on my first stitch, I'm just going to keep my tension kind of just general, just what to make it work. But here's the trick. On this second stitch that I'm getting ready to purl, after I wrap my yarn and pull my needle through, I'm going to give a little tug. And what this does is it kind of helps even up the tension between the 2 so that I don't have any what's called laddering, and that is little gaps between the needles. And I do that on the second stitch too. After I knit it, I'm just going to give my yarn back here just a little tug to cinch that up. We'll continue doing this all the way around all of our needles so we get to the beginning. That is where our tail is. Now I'm coming to the end of this round, so I'm going to finish up here and then we'll place our stitch marker so we can mark the beginning of our round. And then we'll continue on. See, this is that first one that we slipped over from the needle that had the slip knot in it. Now that we purl into that one, we have secured these 2 together. I'm going to take my stitch marker and place it in the fabric right here so I know that this is the beginning of our sock at this point. When we pick up and knit off of this needle, we'll get our active needle here. Continue in the knit 1, purl 1 for several rounds. Now that we've finished with all of our knit 1, purl 1 ribbing, I want to show you how stretchy this ribbing is. You can see there's the knit and then the purls underneath there. That gives it that stretch. Now we're ready to move on into stockinette for the leg portion of our sock. Now the pattern says about 7 to 8 inches depending on your size. And you just straight stockinette. That's knit every stitch. It's a little bit more comfortable because you're not having to move the yarn in front and in back, back and forth. It just stays in the back. Let's see, just knit every stitch. Now that you have a little bit more knitting on your needles, it makes it easier to hang on to, and it's more comfortable to knit these around and just let your other needles hang in the background. So I've knit across this first needle in stockinette, and at this transition point, there's something that sometimes happens that I want to show you. Sometimes you will get an accidental yarn over, and when you come to that, you'll see it. It'll look like this, and I'm just going to put this on here as if I had accidentally yarned over the last time I was changing needles. And I want to show you more in detail. See how there's no base to this stitch right here? See how this one has the purl bump underneath, this one has the V, and this one's just kind of hanging out. Sometimes when you're transitioning from one needle to the next, your yarn will get wrapped around the needle. Super easy to fix, super simple. All we're gonna do is just slide it right off. That's part of our ladder. And it goes into our fabric. One of the things we wanna do is maybe slide this over, pull this one up, and we'll make up that difference when we knit into the next round. And let me show you how that works right here. I'm gonna knit this stitch. Now remember, knit the first one normal. On the second one, we're gonna tug a little bit after we knit it. Knit the next one, tug a little bit on that, only those 2 stitches. That's gonna cinch that up and hide that gap that we had there. Just keep on going in stockinette. That's knitting every stitch, round and round. This is the part where you can customize your leg. If you want a little booty sock, you don't have to do as many rounds. If you want a longer leg sock, add some more inches. There's enough yarn in this skein that comes in the kit that you can go a little bit longer. One of the things I want to point out, the pattern says about 7 to 8 inches. For me, I know, just one little crazy trick, I like to measure certain things that I have with me all the time. Like I know from here to here on my finger is 1 inch. So if I'm ever in a bind and I need to know 1 inch, I can measure from here to here. Just so happens to be on my hand, from here to the tip of my finger is 7 inches. So as I was knitting this sock, I just kept laying my hand down to see how much further I had to go until it was time to start the heel. So when you get to a point where you have to put your knitting down, we have these fantastic little needle wranglers, and I'm going to show you how to use them. They have these little slots in here, and you just slide your needles in. It doesn't really matter where they go, just as long as you get all 4 of them in there. Slide it on like that, holds that side together. Same on this side, just slide them right in. There you go, it holds your project together. You can throw this in your bag, your purse, wherever, and you don't have to worry about them getting unraveled. Now you're ready to knit your cuffs and legs. Next time I'll show you how to turn the heel. Don't worry, it's easier than you think. Be sure to hit the subscribe button below and click the bell to be notified every time we have a new video. Happy knitting!